Attila.
Next. Your Majesty, Excellencies, current and future collaborators and partners, thank you again to the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, the United Arab Emirates Government, the Child Dignity Alliance, and the Interfaith Alliance for bringing us together again. These conversations are important. And we're here today not because we want to talk about the epidemic or perhaps the pandemic, the crisis of online child sexual exploitation and abuse, but because we have to talk about it. And because only by working across the sectors represented here and beyond will we be able to tackle this crisis. I have the great privilege to represent the Global Partnership and Fund to End Violence Against Children. It's an innovative public-private collaboration launched by the UN Secretary General in 2016. Our purpose is to catalyse action and support and leadership that's necessary to deliver on the commitment made by 193 heads of government through the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. And that commitment is to end all forms of violence, abuse and neglect against children by 2030. We should feel the sense of urgency. We have 11 years to go. Each of our 370 members, CSOs, faith networks, governments, UN institutions, academics, businesses, all know that ending violence against children, including online sexual exploitation and abuse, isn't just the right thing to do. It's a smart investment to make. It's the right thing to do because every child matters. Behind the numbers we've heard are horrific stories, tales of abuse, neglect, happening even as we sit here today. Every single photo, every single video of a child being abused is not a data point, it's not a number, it's a young person who will be haunted by those images, the memories of the abuse, and the images which have ceaseless lifespan digitally. It's a smart investment to make, because ending violence against children is universal. 1 billion children every year experience some kind of violence, abuse and neglect. And violence against and abuse of children online is one of the fastest growing forms of violence and abuse against children. That's an epidemic. And when we have numbers that large, it makes it a smart investment for the future of humanity, let alone society and economy, to tackle this issue and tackle it now. But it's not only right and smart. Ending all violence against children and making them safe from sexual exploitation and abuse is possible. And I'm really encouraged that so far today we've already heard solutions. We've heard commitments to advocate, to convene, and to act. From Pope Francis, from Queen Sylvia, from the United Arab Emirates Government, from technology and entertainment companies, academics, and non-profits. And tomorrow we'll hear more from policymakers and from faith leaders who are in a unique position to raise awareness and to inspire action among billions of their followers, and who must be a cornerstone of our collective response. We've also been given a glimpse into the evolving nature of the threat to children online, alongside the shocking statistics of the scale and growth in child sexual abuse material. And the more we understand the threat, the better equipped we will be to respond, and then the more we must all step up and respond. The End Violence Fund, in partnership with Interpol, with ECPAT, and UNICEF and Icenti, is right now undertaking groundbreaking work, which Robert mentioned, that will blend research methodologies to better understand the nature and the threat of online child sexual exploitation and abuse in 14 countries in Africa and Southeast Asia. That work will inform the better targeting of efforts to prevent and respond to online child sexual exploitation and abuse in those countries and elsewhere. Let me offer a few thoughts on some of the actions that between us we are very well equipped to take, and if we in this room aren't equipped, we for sure know people who are, and for which we must all be accountable. We must raise awareness. Ignorance must no longer be an excuse for inaction. And in working with media to break the silence, we must neither sensationalize nor sanitize the nature and the impact of online child sexual exploitation and abuse on children. Nor must we inadvertently offer a counsel of despair. We also need to start talking about the demand side, invest in prevention, and start grappling with some uncomfortable truths. This is a societal problem. Those who produce, who share, who consume child sexual abuse material represent a cross-section of society. They are not a homogeneous group. They exist in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, in our sports clubs, and in our faith communities. Efforts to expand connectivity must go hand in hand with child safety. The internet brings huge potential for children everywhere, but efforts to connect children must take safety into account as a fundamental criterion. Technology companies must be at the forefront of the response. The fight to stop the distribution of CSAM is about the commitment to act and having proportionate resources to do so. Existing and new machine learning models to detect, to classify and prioritize the child abuse material at a much faster speed will be vital given the scale and growth of the problem. With that in mind, I'm pleased to share that the End Violence Fund has just launched a $13 million funding round focused on leveraging technology to tackle online CSEA. We must also continue to invest and scale investment in digital literacy and the skills of children and family so that they can protect themselves and be aware of the risks online. But not only children and families. Industry too must be better equipped so that every business decision considers children first, not as an afterthought. Everyone has a role to play. The End Violence Fund has so far invested over $32 million in initiatives in over 30 countries to tackle online CSEA. And what we have learned is that working with all sectors and all stakeholders is vital to make progress. Governments, industry, international organizations, CSOs, faith leaders, families, children, everyone has a role to play. And we must fix the resource mismatch. As we learn more of what works, we must scale those investments. Our $32 million of investments so far, generously supported by the UK Home Office, by Oak Foundation, and by the Human Dignity Foundation, makes us one of the largest non-governmental investors in this space. That is not a statement I make with any pride whatsoever. It's a statement I make with extreme concern because it's a proxy of the extraordinary mismatch between children online, the rhetoric we hear from partners in rooms like this, and the paucity of resources going into scaling what we already know works, let alone innovating to create new solutions. We must fix that resource mismatch. And our response must be universal. Online CSEA is universal and global. While hosted in the Netherlands and elsewhere, the origins of many images found last year were traced to Africa and Asia in particular. But the demand for such images is global, and our response must continue to be universal and global. Let me finish by saying that I really believe we have an unprecedented historical opportunity and the tools we need to get this job done. As I said earlier, 193 world leaders made a commitment in 2015 that they would end all violence, abuse, and neglect against children by 2030. Let's hold those leaders and their governments to account. We have the We Protect Global Alliance and the Model National Response, signposting a way and a methodology to tackle violence against children and sexual exploitation online. We have the many declarations, the Rome Declaration, the Abu Dhabi Declarations. We have the recent Broadband Commission report into child safety, published last month under a working group co-chaired by Scott Guggenheimer behind me and Joanna Rubinstein. Herding cats at times are coming out with a superb report, which again has a declaration, but it has some actionable steps that governments, that regulators, that industry can take to end sexual exploitation and abuse online. The resources of the End Violence Partnership and Fund are everyone's resources, and we are at your disposal to provide a platform for stakeholders to engage and to take action and to be accountable for that action to make children safe online and offline. Let me end with a quote which has evolved over the centuries but is usually attributed to Hillel I, an appropriate quote because he was a Jewish leader in the 1st century. And he said words that are now often quoted as, "If not us, who? And if not now, when?" And if we here, and all those we know, and all the people and organizations in our networks, do not get a grip and take action proportionate with the problem now. I seriously ask when we will do this. So let's do it. Thank you.